Welcome to Collecting with Confidence, Art Investment Essentials, the Wellspire Advisors video series designed to help art collectors and investors navigate the complexities of art collecting and investment. In this video series, we'll break down key topics like art valuation, estate planning, and market dynamics with expert guests. And now, here's your host, Oliver Pursche.
Welcome back to Art Inspired, the Wellspire series of video blogs for art collectors and those who are interested in either working with collectibles as part of their portfolio or otherwise already own a collection. Today, I'm joined by Heather Flanagan, head of our Family Office Services, as well as Liz Summers, who is also part of our Family Office Services. Thank you both for joining me. Please feel free to introduce yourselves.
Thanks, Oliver. So I'm Heather Flanagan, head of Family Office Services here at Wellspire Advisors. And for the first 15 years of my career, I was a trust and estates and tax attorney. And for the last 15 years, I've been working in financial services, building teams that support trust companies, wealth strategy teams, highly focused on governance and estate planning, tax planning, family dynamics.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Liz Summers. I'm a wealth strategist in the Family Wealth Group here at Wellspire. And like Heather, I am a former practicing estate planning attorney. I spend a lot of time sort of translating estate planning concepts to English and working with ultra high net worth individuals and families as they think through their wealth transfer planning.
Great, thanks. So I guess we'll start at the beginning, Liz, or Heather. I'll start with you. Why is Wellspire doing this?
Well, we have a real focus on kind of meeting the needs of our clients, and we have a lot of clients that have collections, not only just large art collections, but other types of collectibles. So we also, many of us within the firm have personal interest in various areas. I myself have a very strong background in art and have been collecting art myself for many years. So I think, it started around really centering our advice toward our clients, and we were finding that it was really important for us to bring up within the conversation with our clients, do you have a collection? Because sometimes in some families, it can really represent a significant financial asset within their overall estate.
So Liz, family dynamics are often complicated. And when it comes to art and collectibles, my experience has been it's not just monetarily precious, but often also sentimentally precious. What are some of the added components that you look for in your work when it comes to dealing with families and art collections?
Absolutely. You're completely right. There's an added emotional component when it comes to collections of art. And that's really because art isn't just an object. It's a connection to the genius and beauty of the world. And it's also really a reflection of your personal taste in a way something like a sheriff's dog isn't. So all families, with wealth, you have all the same problems that all families have, but with an additional layer of complexity. So family relationships are hard. Talking about resources is hard. And one of the areas where I spend a lot of space personally is sort of structuring and preparing for family meetings. Heather is the maestro here, but really creating this kind of safe, welcoming space for mom and dad to come together and figure out what they're comfortable sharing with the next generation, and hopefully getting everyone a little bit more on that same page. Especially with art collections, intergenerational communication is just so important because we're creating this asset that could potentially, benefit the family for multiple generations, bring joy and meaning to multiple generations. And sometimes we make the assumption that that communication is occurring when maybe it isn't necessarily. We tend to think that we're being very clear and direct, and sometimes we're not. So it sounds really, really simple, but I like to start with kind of the building blocks of, Are your children interested in your collection? Do they have the education, the aptitude, the background to, really enjoy, manage, grow, assist with this collection, going forward? Do they have a background in art history, or business with an art concentration? Have they been by your side as you've been growing and building that collection over the years? Have they talked to you or their siblings about their desire to continue? Really starting with, how do you feel about this? I think is a huge first step.
Thanks. Heather, what else should a matriarch or patriarch think about when it comes to the family dynamic and ultimately eventually passing on the art collection?
Well, I think Liz made a lot of very good points in that, what she was saying. But I think what happens, and what's nice, and what a lot of people don't consider, as Liz said, they think they're having these conversations along the way. Maybe they are in small fits and spurts, but to actually have a formalized family meeting specifically about the art collection can be useful for some families. And even if the family hasn't had a formal family meeting to talk about wealth transfer, this is actually can be a very good entree for a lot of families that are interested in art. It can engage that next generation to discuss something that is actually tangible. Maybe they have an interest in it, they have an excitement about it, and that can lead to actually a fuller discussion for the family to talk about, how are we going to transfer this art? What does it mean to our family? How does it tie into our family values? Do various people within the family or even outside the family, are there friends, are there extended family that have a connection to this art or this collection? And should we be considering all of that whole community of people? Do we want to utilize the art for charitable purposes? Is our family philanthropically minded, and do we want to share the art with the greater community? Do we have relationships with various groups within the art world, as far as do we have a relationship with a local or a national museum? Do we like to work with small boutiques? Do we like to show our art? These are all things that the family can sit down and have a very interesting discussion around. I do recommend that if they are planning to utilize the family meeting for further discussion, that they do use a third party that is kind of an expert in this area that can sit down, help organize the family, make sure that everybody has the information or the education that they need to have a full discussion. Think about who we're inviting to that meeting, really prepare for it, and think about what you want to accomplish within that meeting. But I think art and collections are something that can really be that triggering event for families to come together.
Yeah, and if and certainly I can speak about my family. When we were kids growing up, my sister and I, very different perspectives and views and desires about the world. So that certainly adds an extra layer of complexity and need for communication, as you just pointed out very eloquently. But what else can go wrong when we think about past a family meeting and the education, and time passes, right? Like, we have a meeting, everything's hunky-dory, we have a general agreement and stuff is put down on paper, but over time things change, and so there's some additional layers there.
Absolutely. I'll let Liz jump in on this one as well, but I think it's important for families to really acknowledge and know what that collection is worth on a financial basis. So there's a lot of questions that they should be asking and answering along the way as they're collecting the art. I mean, every family, and whether it's a large, very, expensive art collection or even a small collection of art, can also be important to keep an inventory of. But you should keep a very thorough inventory of your art. Many families have art in various homes, and so it's important to know the location of where that art is. Is it on display someplace? Have we lent it somewhere? We have to keep track of the cost basis. What did we pay for that artwork? Is it currently being leveraged? Some people are utilizing their art collection as an asset to lend, to get, using it to get credit, and be able to kind of provide some liquidity if it's quite an expensive asset in their overall estate. We should know how that artwork is titled. We should know whether or not it's insured. We should know whether or not it's been appraised. Like, all of these things are very important things to keep track of. And sometimes it's hard when you're just in that process of collecting. I find that a lot of families have fun, acquiring things, but then keeping track of it and thinking about, oh my gosh, what are the tax implications? How am I going to provide for this in my estate plan and transfer it to the next generation? Those are secondary thought processes. And so in order to kind of be able to have those good conversations within the family, you should have a very thorough idea of, the value of that art and a lot of that background that I mentioned.
Thanks. Liz, is there maybe, I don't know, I'll call it a case study or an example of something that you can walk us through that you've experienced to help illustrate this a little bit better?
Sure. I don't have one that I've experienced personally, but one that's been in the news quite a bit lately is the Newman family. And I don't know if you're familiar, but tremendous family of collectors based in New York, Hubert and Dolores Newman. Hubert had a collection worth over $1 billion owned by a trust. Dolores had a number of important works, specifically by Basquiat, that she had bought early in his career. And although they were still married, they had been separated since 1989, and the understanding within the family was always that, all of Dolores's works would go to their 3 daughters in equal shares. Everyone was on the same page, or so we thought. So in 2015, Dolores had to have some emergency surgery. Her daughter Belinda helped her access some counsel right ahead of that surgery. She made some changes to her estate plan that actually directed almost the entirety of her estate, including the artworks, to Belinda. So she had told, others, including her daughter Melissa, once she recovered, that she wanted to go back, change her estate plan, reallocate. But unfortunately, she passed away in 2016 before she was able to do that. And the tragedy of it is this family that was very close has been in litigation pretty much ever since. So not every family, of course, has a $1 billion art collection, but it really does highlight some of those potential traps for the unwary around communication, and really making sure that mom and dad are sitting down and setting out their goals and desires for the collection with the entire family, that everyone knows where things go and how it's going to work. And that most importantly, the estate plan reflects those goals and intentions. Having a warm conversation isn't sufficient. That's not legally binding, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your circumstances. So one of the things that really comes up a lot in that context of conveying and communicating that estate plan is it's hard and it's scary to have conversations that can be difficult. We're all human. Some of us are conflict avoidant. Certainly a lot of us here where I am in the Midwest. But what I always say is, if you have to have these conversations where you think you have to convey difficult information, tell someone something that you think they might not want to hear, it is always better to have those conversations while you're still here so you can heal the relationship.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's incredibly important. Heather, when I think about structure of ownership, and I know that a couple of other colleagues, Rich Yam in particular, is going to be joining us later on and talk about some of the details. But, how things are owned, whether it's in a trust or an LLC, is really, really important. And I think, Liz, you were kind of also talking a little bit earlier about the potential for fractional ownership, in the sense of you're not going to tear a painting apart, but if it's in an LLC, you own shares of that LLC and it's split, and there's complexities from a planning perspective around that. Heather, just looking past that component, you mentioned philanthropy earlier. How do you approach that, and how does that fit into the overall picture?
Well, especially around in with art collections, a lot of people, have a passion about it, and many of them want to share their passion with others. So they aren't always just leaving it in their homes, for their own personal enjoyment. They like to either, lend art to various, uh, you know, places where it can be displayed, or they can actually lend art out to various charities. If the charity is having some sort of um, event, and there's art involved, they can lend it out to the charity so that people can view it there. There's a lot of different ways that people can share their passion and knowledge about art with their own community or with the world at large. And so it, I think, is a great opportunity for families to think about philanthropy if they aren't already thinking about philanthropy. If the family itself and the multiple generations have a passion around art and the collection that the family has, there can be another full discussion within the family about how they might want to think about approaching that collection and utilizing it for their philanthropic purposes. And so those can be wonderful discussions, but also then there's follow-up. You generally work with a philanthropy advisor to help you kind of walk through what your options are as far as utilizing the art for charitable purposes. And then, once you pick a direction to go, then you've got, advisors, especially, the way that we work with clients is we've got not only our wonderful advisors like you, Oliver, but we've got people on our wealth strategy team who are experts in tax and estate planning to help either set up structures for those philanthropic purposes, and then understand the implications of setting those things up and what is involved. Do we need to insure it in a different way? Do we need to appraise it in a different way? Do we need to look at this art differently if we're going to now not only have it for our own purposes and thinking about transferring it from generation to generation, but now also as a family utilizing that art for a broader purpose of philanthropy?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to digest there, and there's an enormous amount of, and I can speak with some experience here, moving parts from the insurance to, do you lend it out? Do you gift it outright? And I always remind clients, the IRS looks at your entire balance sheet, and they have their own view of what something is worth, and you've got to make sure that you're very precise, and people often get into trouble there. But going back to the philanthropy component, there's a lot of charities out there, and I'm not criticizing or picking one as better than the other. But Liz, what kind of questions should somebody be asking of a charitable organization that you're considering gifting or lending an entire collection or a number of pieces to?
Absolutely. Well, I feel like I'm the hammer for hard conversations today. But I would always start with really
It's because you're so pleasant and have such a wonderful way about you that it's
You're too kind. But really starting with, having an open dialogue around being honest with ourselves and being honest with our gift officer about, do they really want what you have to offer? Is this something that's consistent with their existing collections? If we're hypothetically talking about an art museum, is this something that they would really be able to incorporate and display appropriately? Do they have space? Do they have the appropriate conditions for preservation? Are they, is this something that jives with the overall theme of what they're bringing to the table? Sometimes we have a museum that's incredibly eager to take the collection, where it would be this huge gift, it would be incredible, but maybe they don't have the funding to really support the collection in the way that it deserves. And in that case, when we sit down and we think about that gift agreement, which we want to have in great detail, we want to make sure we're also thinking through, are we making an additional contribution of liquid assets to help support both the institution itself and the collection specifically going forward? Also, very sensitive issue. Are we talking about deaccession? Is that something we're open to? Is it something we're not? Would that be, completely contrary to what we think of as our legacy? I really encourage, anyone who's considering working with a museum to think through that as part of that negotiation.
Yeah, and obviously engage with the right advisors who know how to navigate that space is important. Yeah, so this has been terrific. Heather, any last thoughts that you want to share?
Well, I
I mean,
think that
it's an endless topic, right? So
it can be, and it's a wonderful topic, and it's a lot of fun. Other opportunities with family, and even starting with children at very young ages to get them involved. I think of many families who have a passion around art are already doing this, but educate them, bring them to the museums, bring them to the art collections, teach them about art in general and why it's important to you specifically, and talk about the pieces and show them, bring them into that at age appropriate times, and kind of have that consistent education along the way. I think it's a great way for families to connect, but also it helps that next generation kind of appreciate what's being built over time. And then you kind of develop that passion in them as well. Again, the fun part is acquiring it. The tough part is kind of keeping track of everything. So work with your advisor on these things and make sure if they aren't asking you these questions that you're letting them know, I have a large art collection, or I have a collection of cars, or whatever it is that you are acquiring with significant assets. And then let that advisor help you kind of walk through that. There's so many different opportunities with these various assets. A lot of people think that, I had mentioned earlier, you can actually use, large collections potentially to create liquidity within your estate by, lending against it. So that's an option for some people to be able to do that. We can kind of put people in touch with the various experts and the people that they need to talk to. But keep track of everything and make sure you're thinking about it in your estate plan.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we spoke about prior to this is, and people need to realize, and this is where an art advisor and a comprehensive team really becomes important, is the larger the collection or the more specific the collection, the harder it is to potentially find a home for it, right? Having to use the Newman collection as an example, having $1 billion worth of art, that shrinks the pool of organizations that can take care of that greatly, and that's where it becomes very important. Or, if you have a watch collection of very rare watches, that also becomes very specific and has its own nuances to it. So a lot to digest here. Thank you both. This has been absolutely terrific. I know Wellspire has a lot of other resources that we have available via our website, other blogs that have been written by some of my colleagues. Any last parting words from either of you? All right.
Thank you. Thank you so much,
Thank you for
Oliver.
having
Thanks,
us.
Liz. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening or watching this video of Collecting with Confidence, Art Investment Essentials, presented by Wellspire Advisors. If you have any feedback or questions, including suggestions for future topics and guests, reach out to us directly or send us an email to clientrelations@wealthspire.com.